Welcome to American Dreams. My guest today is Howard Shore. Howard, welcome to today's show.
Alan, thank you for having me.
So, Howard, you're an author, a business coach, but can you give us some background of how you got to where you are today?
Thank you for asking. It's been quite a journey. Ironically, if people looked at my, the accolades that we normally put up, our degrees, where we've been, what we've accomplished, they'd be like, wow. But there's always a backstory, and I think it's the backstory that's important. I'm going to go all the way back to when I was young. So if it weren't for my mom, I would have wound up in special education. I was dyslexic, had severe ADHD, actually, ironically, even at a young age, I had sleep apnea. So I used to fall asleep uncontrollably in class, and people thought it was because I didn't go to bed early at night, but that wasn't the truth. And so it started there where my mom really, set the stage that, this person does have a brain and doesn't belong in special education. And I probably fought that all the way through childhood. I didn't have great grades. Wasn't a typical person you would expect to go to college. And ironically, when it was time to do that, my dad actually talked me out of it. But if you even go back a step before that, I get to learn exactly how leadership shouldn't work. I worked in my dad's business. I actually managed departments for him as a kid. It was a very toxic work environment, high turnover, people, including me, not treated very well, always having cash flow problems. And so I got a really good education on how not to do it and kind of figured out pretty quickly I didn't want to replicate that. And so now fast forward, my dad talks me out of going to college, and he's like, I've got this business you can buy with the money you've saved up. You get it pretty cheap. Go do it. And that was a really incredible lesson for me. I really didn't know anything about business. I hadn't been to school. I didn't know how to read financial statements. I didn't love my industry. I didn't know much about it. And here I was, I owned a business in this industry. So you learn a lot from going to that. First of all, if I were to go back knowing what I know today, I would never even have entered. That was typesetting and graphic design. Typesetting doesn't exist anymore. It took me about 3 years to figure that out, and I wound up selling the business because I realized I was down a dead path in something I didn't love. And even though I was growing 100% a quarter, I knew that was going to run its course, and I knew I needed to learn a lot more. And then, and I had this gentleman that I worked with. His name was Mike, and I wanted to be like Mike. He was actually our accountant, but he was so much more to me than my accountant. No matter, he was a certified mediator. He was, accountant. He had certifications and everything you can imagine. So any question that I had, I would go to Mike. And then for some reason, I had this impression because I was young that that's what an accountant was. And I realized that I really did not understand. I understood how to market, sell, create product and service and all of that kind of stuff. Didn't understand the financials. So I said, you know what? I'm going to go to school. I'm going to study accounting. And it was all because of Mike. So I'm very grateful to Mike for doing that for me. I should have figured out very, very quickly, while I needed that knowledge, it wasn't the right profession for me. And KPMG should have been doing assessments when they hired me, because eventually I became a CPA, all of that. But I never went to class. I was so bored. I found it so disinteresting. I just had the intellect to understand what I needed to understand to pass the CPA exam and all of that. And I very quickly got to figure out that wasn't the path for me. And anybody who would test my behavioral style, my real geniuses would not have put me in accounting. So fast forward, I stumbled along, wound up head of strategy of a $5 billion company, which was one of my clients, had a strategy of a $20 billion company, learned a lot through the corporate environments of structure that worked, and really a lot of stuff that didn't work. So I learned a lot during working for other people. I really figured out there had to be a better way. I saw so much waste around me, which, by the way, is where the leaky bucket came from. Companies growing, they do well, but there's so much opportunity they're squandering. They're just so worried about next and not really thinking about the things to capture the opportunities that are right in front of them. And that's what I kind of learned from those journeys. Then I realized I didn't want to be in these big Goliath companies. I'm an entrepreneur. and I started moving, turned my dad's business around for the third time. I helped him not go bankrupt a third time, plan an exit strategy, which he did. And then I worked with an importer, and watched how they squandered opportunity. And that's kind of how I want to be in a coach. Is I knew there had to be a better way. I wanted to have a life of impact. I didn't necessarily, although I've owned, I think, 8 or 9 businesses since, really, I wanted to impact others, and I wanted to help other leaders and entrepreneurs find a better way.
Listening to you, Howard, I can immediately feel a certain kinship as an entrepreneur, that you just have this instinct of problem solving, and also I'll say that a certain aura of meekness and humility. And I think that I can see why people will gravitate to you and like you as a coach, because you're very, very relatable. I want to move, though, into a couple of things. First of all, you're currently residing in Florida, but I imagine, is that where you grew up, or did you?
No, I was born in Brooklyn, raised on Long Island. Senior year of high school, my parents did me a favor and moved me down here. I thought, they just destroyed my life, and actually it's been a blessing. And I've been down in the South Florida area ever since.
So what are some of the pivotal moments and lessons learned that helped you arrive at the point you are today?
Well, God, if I go back to that first business, I'd like a do-over. As much as I said I grew as much and I got an exit, it would have been far larger, and it would have been a much easier journey. So I was raised in a generation, as you were as well, is, work harder and harder, and it'll bear fruit. And I used to wear working long hours as a badge of honor rather than a failure. And so the only reason I was successful in the first business is I worked 100 hours a week. And I didn't figure out the right people to put around me, and figuring out who could help me get to where I wanted to. And I used to try to figure out everything myself. So I would say that first business was a learning lesson from a standpoint of, I'm embarrassed to say, I still remember a woman, Barbie, working for me, and remember her crying because she was an artist. And, I was way too direct earlier in my career. Thanks to 9 coaches, I'm a different human being today, that I hired for myself, because I realized that just being right was not the right answer to get ahead. And so I also had to learn human relations. So if you go back in some of those organizations that I worked for, that I got to do amazing things, you would see abrasive on my performance appraisals, too harsh, and maybe standards were too high, stuff like that. And so I had to learn through my journey how to bring other people along, and how to reframe and really work on a team. And I'll say that there were a number of times over the years where, I've actually gone back to former bosses and thanked them, not only for their mentorship, but for putting up with my crap. And so the journeys I think we learn everything through our trials and tribulations. So I learned about unique ability by trying certain things like accounting that I have an acumen for. I can tell a business model works, but that doesn't mean that ought to be what I'm doing. So through my different travels and the different things I did, I think it really helped me figure out where I can add the most value to everybody around me. It also helped me understand what was important to me, because early in my career, I think some of my biggest lessons were I thought too much about how much money I was going to make, or how to make the company money, but not why things mattered, and what would actually get my heart pumping in a positive way. I think I just worried about hard work and making money. And so I had to learn the hard way that there was a lot more to it. And if I shifted my thinking, then that thinking would actually cause better and better results. And so fast forward from those learnings, every year I'm trying to always figure out, how do I work less and impact more, and constantly looking at different lenses that way. And so obviously my health is good. because I made that shift. So I'll say that those were some pivotal learnings in my journey of how I needed to grow as a leader and as a person to be able to have the impact on the world that I was capable.
Yeah, Howard, a lot of individuals, they want to go into business for themselves, and as they look at their own foundation of life, they'll often question, what is my unique ability? And you use that word and frequently in the last few minutes of unique ability. So as a business coach, someone comes to you and says, Howard, how do I learn my unique ability? Is there a process? Is it that you walk individuals through that will help them drive into the right segments of where they're really good?
That's a great question. So it's interesting because everybody thinks they're hiring coaches and consultants because of their process, and I've got lots of them. My unique ability is discernment, and my ability, no matter what's going on, actually the more complex, the better, is to actually see what's going on and to see what needs to happen and what needs to stop happening and help others see the world differently. So what I'm going to tell you is, yes, there's a battery of assessments that people can take that can kind of help them. But typically I'm observing, interacting with a CEO or a leader or a team, and then I'm really helping them figure out, why do you spend so much time doing something you hate and clearly doesn't bring you any energy, and honestly you suck at it? Why don't you spend more time over here where you're going to add a lot more value? And so some of it's trial and error, some of it's obvious. Most people, if you quiz them enough, know what their unique ability is, but they don't know how to spend a lot more time using that. And so typically I'm using processes and systems to get them to spend more time doing where they're going to, doing what would give them energy and they'd have the largest impact. And then there's some tools, like simple tools. You get people to kind of, all right, write down where all your time goes. Where do you spend your time, every day, every week, every month? And let's kind of break those down into kind of activities. And then you can kind of, if you use an axis of, I'm really good at it, it's a poor of it. And you use another axis of, I really love it, or I really hate it. And you kind of create a matrix. Obviously, we want to do things that we really love, that we're great at. And so if you kind of think about a diagram that way and you start plotting where you spend your time, it becomes obvious. The stuff we're really good at that we love is pinpointing our unique ability. The stuff that, and by the way, that we love, but we're not great at, those are hobbies, and don't make that your business model. Just enjoy it and go do it, but you're not going to really accomplish much in the world. You'll get some enjoyment from it. And then where most entrepreneurs are spending their time is things that they're good at, but they don't like. And they might even be great, but they don't like it. So finance was a good example of that for me. I'm great at looking at, financial models and stuff like that and just pinpointing what needs to go on. If I had to do that all day long, like I did in a prior life, God, just shoot me, right? So I know that's something I need to give up, even though I might be good at it. Somebody else who's going to be great at it and love it is still going to do it far better than I am and get much further faster because they love it. And then that last group of things, which also points to the opposite of unique abilities, the things you should stay away from, is we just suck at them, right? And so if we just stay away from the sucky stuff and stay at the stuff that we're great at and we love, that is really going to pinpoint people to their unique ability. So taking that something more practical, my unique ability, and if I did this all day long, I would be super happy if it was every day, is to get on a call with somebody, for them to share the picture of what's going on, help them shape more meaning to it, bring in all the data that they're unconsciously not allowing themselves to see, and help them get to an answer. I do that faster than anybody else I know, at a level that everybody else would say is transformational for them. That's my unique ability. That's where I should spend my time. Everything else I need to get rid of. And that's what I spend my life trying to do. And that's why I have a team to help me.
So, Howard, in your book, Business is a Leaky Bucket, where do you see most businesses getting stalled?
So here's what's funny. The whole idea of the leaky bucket, and when I was head of strategy for Ryder Systems, which was a $5 billion company at the time, I actually used leaky bucket as a metaphor for our strategic planning and business planning sessions for that year. I was so frustrated with how much the company underperformed its capability that I'm like, we just gotta really look at, we have all of this opportunity here and it's just getting away from us. So there's a couple of things that I think are killing businesses, which don't get captured. So first of all, everybody thinks the secret to what they need to do is in their financial statement. I'm a CPA, and I can honestly tell everybody your financial statements are not wrong, but they're not telling you what you need. Most of what you need is not showing up in the financial statements. So, for example, there's no financial statement line item on anybody's financial statements that said, I hired a dumbass. Some of them have cost me millions, all right? If you replace the non-A players, money shows up and you can't even explain it. You grow faster, you get more profitable, you need less people, all because you made better people decisions. So the number one thing is too many leaders are not 100% committed to A player only organizations. They say it's too hard, it's impossible. It's not impossible. And definitely too many leaders are working with non-A player leadership teams, and it's costing them a ton of opportunity, and it's squandering a lot of what they have already captured into their business bucket. The second thing that I would say is too much incremental thinking. So Dan Sullivan talks about 10x is easier than 2x. Before Dan came up with that, Jim Collins was about the big, hairy, audacious goal. And too often, people maybe come up with these audacious goals, but everything they're doing is incremental to make this just a little bit better, a little bit smarter. They're so big on efficiency that they're getting really efficient at crappy business models, or business models that have, a very short ceiling. And they really need to be going after, the BHAG. So, typically what I almost want to challenge people to do is make your BHAG your 3HAG, and then let's see what you need to do this year, rather than think 10 years out. So I don't think they're thinking transformationally enough in where they're going. And then I'll say the last item and obviously I have 15 leaks in my book. The last item I would say is a scarcity mentality. So a lot of leaders will say they have an abundant mentality, but we'll go back to the P&L again. They look at every person they hire as an expense. They look at every single item in their P&L below revenue as an expense. Those are all investments. I need to see more CEOs and leaders asking the question, when I invest in this new position, what money is going to show up? What is my return on every dollar I get in payroll? But because they have a scarcity mindset, they hire people too junior. They don't fill open positions. They don't create positions that are missing. They cut corners to try to be efficient in cost, and that scarcity mentality really holds them back.
So, Howard, what is your ideal client? What the size of company you like to work with? Are they early stage?
So ironically,
late stage?
I got to go back to BHAG because we just updated our BHAG, which is really helping us shape our client kit portfolio. So we had a lot of right clients in our past portfolio of clients, but we want that percentage to go way up. And so my ideal client has a very long-term mindset. They know that if we're going to do anything transformational together, it's not a project that we're going to do together. It's not even a year we're going to do together. We're going to be together as partners for years, where, my job is really to kick the crap out of everybody, to keep thinking much broader and much clearer, and continually raising the lid of everybody in the organization. So my ideal client has a long-term mindset. The other thing is they don't have that scarcity mentality. We like to take equity in clients, and the right clients, obviously. If I would invest money in your business, being an advisor that takes money in your business is really not a smart move. There are people, the companies that I would make money in because they really have very high ceiling potential. So a good example is Canada Solutions. A company came to me a few years back and actually wouldn't meet my core customer the way we're defining it today because they were too small in revenue. They were only around 3.5 to 5 million in revenue, bouncing around for that for 18 years. Fast forward, because we're now on year 3, we have a $250 million revenue pipeline in a software business. So all of you listening knows if we even close half of that, we're over $1 billion valuation. We've got a contract on a people side of the business that didn't exist that is a $150 million contract. So the type of people that are ideal for me have vision. They have very high ceilings they want to reach. They're lifelong learners. They want to constantly be challenged. And they recognize they have enough humility to know today that incremental isn't going to work and they need somebody to push them along the way to get there. And if you needed to put revenue around it, typically they're in the $10 million to $100 million range when we start. So we can get them to that $1 billion level. And they also have plenty of capital available for us to do whatever we need to do and are willing and ready and able if we need to raise money once we have that great idea to move forward.
What personal philosophy guides or approach do you use to business coaching? In other words, how often do you want to meet with your clients?
So what's interesting is so my purpose in life is transformational impact. I don't want to do anything incremental. To do that, I need to work with the CEO, I need to work with the leadership team, and I need to work on the business with the team, which means I want to impact everybody in the organization. Because of that, our mindset's a little bit different. Most coaches and consultants, they worry about billable hours and time spent with people. I believe the more time our clients want us to spend with them, that means the more engaged they are and the more transformational impact. So there's a wide array, depends on, because I do individual executive coaching. And in that case, we're meeting, a couple times a month with the CEO, helping them to think differently, sometimes more often, depending on how much chaos and growth is going on in the business. But most of our clients, we're working with the leader, the team, and the organization. We're touching people every week. And I have a team approach in my firm. So I may not be touching them every week, but somebody in my firm is touching that organization every week because we're running alongside. We're not showing up, throwing up, and saying, here, we'll see you next quarter. We're running alongside with them. We're an extension of that team.
The rate of change that the world is coming into with the advancement of AI is absolutely, astounding. What advice would you give in today's environment to an aspiring entrepreneur?
Well, you've also got to look, not even just the aspiring, it's the existing businesses are the ones that need the biggest wake-up call, because the newer ones, they grew up with technology. They don't walk away anywhere without a phone. They're always on technology. And I think the younger generation thinks differently. Our younger clients think very differently than our older clients. So I would say that I would say every business has to you are in the technology business. Every single business, technology is not a tool. It's a way of life. And you've got to look at some really big macro changes going on in the world. Unemployment is not going away. Low unemployment is not going away. This is going to be a perennial problem for us in the U.S. going forward. Secondly, we just had this great opportunity to raise pricing for the last several years. That is going to start really capping out. Inflation's not going away, and your cost structures the cost is going to keep going up, and your ability to raise prices like you did over the last 3 years, that's going away. The only way to address this is technology. So you can't just be thinking about this incrementally either. You've got to be thinking about what made Amazon, and what made these other companies great is they've been using AI for years. AI is not new. They've been transforming business models using technology. And if you as business owners do not realize that your only way going forward is leveraging technology differently, and I don't care what industry, and everybody argues, well, it's different from our industry, somebody is going to knock you off. They are going to knock you out, and you're going to be down for the count. All right. I personally realized, even as a coach, so, what do I need to worry about technology? Big time. First of all, we have to steer clients. I am actually going to go and get a college education in AI. I made that decision recently. I'm entering a program at Columbia University with one of the renowned people because I want to bring a framework back to my clients to think about AI differently. This is not just using ChatGPT to answer some questions or write an email better. We've got to be transformational in how we interact with customers, how we acquire customers. AI is going to be crucial to that. And even if we take out the word AI, technology is crucial to that. Think about what we're doing right now. Half of my work is through Zoom or something like that. All right. It's no longer going out to people every day. It's also enabled me to do business anywhere in the world. It's enabled me to add more value quickly because even though you're not right in front of me, I can look you straight in the eyes, Alan, and know what's going on and know when you're holding back. All right. Technology is recording our meetings and doing our notes for us. Technology in our firm, we have already come up with ways where we are saving days and weeks of time using technology. And it's crucial because every business owner, every leader has to realize whether you are getting paid time for money like people do in professional services, your every hour is worth something. And I would argue any CEO of worth, your hour is worth anywhere between $2,000 and $10,000 at least per hour. So if you just use technology in a way to free up an hour a week, take that $2,000 or whatever your number is, multiply that times 52, and that's really how much money that's going to show up on your bottom line by leveraging technology differently.
Howard, this is extremely informative. I appreciate you being with us today on the show. Individuals that the listeners that want to follow up, get more information, where would you lead them to?
Well, a lot of people want to check you out, so they go to LinkedIn and find, and by the way, you have to use Howard M. Shore because there's a famous producer that's done Lord of the Rings and other great music for movies. And if you do Howard Shore, it doesn't come up. So it's Howard M. Shore. You go to LinkedIn, you go to our website at activategroupinc.com. So you see our name behind us, and you'll be able to get a hold of us there.
Pleasure having you with us today, Howard.
Thank you, Alan.